Greetings, everyone. Welcome to the Justice Roundtable Assembly. We are a coalition of over 100 organizations working in Washington to transform federal criminal justice policy issues. We are the coalition responsible for the passage of the Second Chance Reentry Bill. Known as the Second Chance Reentry Bill, which passed in 2008. I don't know if anybody was around who we were working on the Tulia case when Vanita Gupta was just out of law school working at the NAACP Legal Defense Fund, and was deployed to that small town in Texas and just opened up the whole mess, shall we say, in terms of what was happening in Tulia and with law enforcement reform and accountability. Those who were around for the passage of the Fair Sentencing Act in 2010, our sentencing reform working group, really on the front lines in terms of trying to reduce that disparity between crack and powder cocaine. Wasn't perfect, we wanted one-to-one. Wasn't perfect, we wanted retroactivity, but it was a start to many things that we see happening today. So that was our reentry working group with the Second Chance Act, our law enforcement reform working group with the Tulia case, our sentencing reform working group with the Fair Sentencing Act. And just recently, it really was primarily because of the efforts of many people in this room that the First Step Act, which passed at the end of 2018, was made robust with some significant sentencing reforms in it, which might not have happened had not folk really kind of stood the line. So as a result, we did finally get retroactivity of the Fair Sentencing Act. And many of the people we see coming out of prison today are coming out of prison as a result of that provision becoming retroactive. So for those who don't know, my name is Nikichi Taifa. I convened the Justice Roundtable and founded it really along with my colleague Jean Guerrero, if I remember Jean from back in the day. And just a scant 6 months ago, we spun off the Justice Roundtable into an independent entity with our new home here at the a True Reformer building, which houses public welfare and other events. So I'm really thrilled that you all are here and that you've been part of this process. Hi, Mark Maurer. His book is over there, The Meaning of Life. Thank you for all that you've done. I'm not going to start pointing out people because that, gets kind of...
We'll be here all that.
Yeah. But what I do want to do right now is go around and find out who is out there in the audience, who is in the Zoom, and then we're going to introduce our feature presenter as well as our stalwarts up there on the hill who are really making things happen in both the Senate and the House, and they're going to share with you legislative updates. I just want to conclude before we go around and say that this is a public meeting. The lifeblood of the Justice Roundtable are our working groups, which are our more intimate, more private, I guess you could say, meetings where we really talk strategy and really get down in the trenches. But this is basically an information and education sharing setting. But even at that, we're not necessarily wanting you to go to the New York Times or the Washington Post or anything along those lines. But again, don't say anything that you would not want accidentally showing up, out there in the media. My mic is on mute according to Zoom. Okay, so according to me, my mic is on. So my techies, my mic is on mute. Hopefully there are folk who are out there in Zoom land who can beat lips. Abida, can we check that? Okay, we will be checking that. And thank you so much. If there's anything else along those lines, how did you find that out? Okay. Okay, well. Okay, we're going to try to, fix that. So I guess we'll go around the table first, but just your name and who you're representing, because you'll be introduced as part of our presentations. But I just want to say, Jessalyn McCurdy, she's my right-hand person in crime, okay, in criminal justice reform and transformation. Jessalyn really just has been on the, on the front lines, just a stalwart expert in any and all things legislative. So just Jessalyn, say who you're with, and yeah.
Jessalyn McCurdy, with the American Civil Liberties Union, Washington Legislative Office.
Hi everyone, I'm Lauren Moore and I'm with Senator Kamala Harris.
Hello, I'm Patricia Richmond and I'm with Senator Durbin.
Michael Collins, Drug Policy Alliance.
Good morning, Nicole Porter with the Sentencing Project.
Jose Walsh with the Friends Committee on National Legislation, the Quakers.
Jenny Collier with Collier Collective, representing Safer Foundation and Innocence Project.
Hi, Mel Wilson, National Association of Social Workers.
Kara Gotch, the Sentencing Project. Good morning, Emily Mace from Representative Westerman's office.
Hi, Rachel Rossi from the House Judiciary Crime Subcommittee.
Good morning, my name's Tona Boyd and I'm with Senator Booker.
I'm gonna save you for last. Okay, here we are.
Pat Marks, putting mercy into criminal justice.
Charlie Sullivan with CURE. Samuel Kaplan with CURE DC. Good morning, everybody.
Malcolm Young, New Opportunities.
Good morning, everyone. Anthony Thomas Davis, and I, for those who don't know, recently left the Brennan Center for Justice, and next steps to come. Thank you.
Zakia Sankara Jabbar, Racial Justice Now, DMV chapter.
Good morning, Angeline Fraser-Giles with the National Network for Justice.
Good morning, Christian Brooks, Presbyterian Church, USA.
Sammy Goldsmith, Religious Action Center of Reform Judaism.
Sam Kuhn from Senator Durbin's office.
John Stannard with the Church of Scientology's National Affairs Office.
Deandrea Powell, Legislative Assistant for the NAACP Washington Bureau. Honor Reed, NAACP Washington Bureau.
Rachel Marshall, Campaign for Youth Justice.
Dave Preisnell, National Association of Criminal Defense Lawyers.
Mark Maurer, the Sentencing Project.
Will Dobbs Alsop with the Brennan Center.
Kirsten Dunham with the Brennan Center.
Annalise Felicia with the National Juvenile Justice Network.
Serene Singh, also with the National Juvenile Justice Network.
Emma Harrison with the Campaign for Fair Sentencing of Youth.
Ashley Carter, Advancement Project.
Leola Abraham, Justice Programs Office at American University.
Ashley De La Garza with the Public Defender Service, Community Defender Division.
Hi, I'm Amanda Sanchez. I'm an intern at the Washington Office in Latin America.
I'm Imani McGee. I'm an intern at Free Minds Prison Book Club.
Vivian Buchanan, Campaign for the Fair Sentencing of Youth.
Eve Strickberger, intern at the Justice Policy Institute.
Good morning, Grant Smith, Drug Policy Alliance.
Annie Freitas, Operation Restoration.
Stephanie Bazell, College and Community Fellowship.
Kendall Johnson, I'm an intern at the Criminal Justice Policy Foundation.
Linda Jackson Leslie, the Taifa Group.
Hi, Suzanne Bergeron, National Urban League, Washington Bureau.
Gabrielle Gray, Leadership Conference.
Hi, I'm Wayne Burgess with the U.S. Sentencing Commission.
Kyle O'Dowd, National Association of Criminal Defense Lawyers.
Eric Shee, intern at the National Association of Criminal Defense Lawyers.
And Nick Lozowski, a representative of Westerman's office.
Leah Sakala with the Urban Institute Justice Policy Center.
Christopher McNeil, Mayor's Office on Returning Citizens Affairs.
Talia Gilbert, Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights Under Law.
Max Rose, Sheriffs for Trusting Communities. Daryl Thompson with the Center for Law and Social Policy.
Asia Richardson with the Campaign for Fair Sentencing of Youth. Carmel Misso with the Campaign for the Fair Sentencing of Youth.
Adam Kenworth, the Campaign for the Fair Sentencing of Youth.
Rashid Marner for the Campaign for the Fair Sentencing of Youth.
David Jimenez, Prison Fellowship.
Hey everybody, hey really. Marcy Mustart with the Campaign for Youth Justice and the Act for JJ Coalition, and I just wanted to add one other win that the Roundtable has been instrumental in, which is getting JJDPA reauthorized last December, which will get all kids out of adult jails so hopefully in the next 3 years. We need your help.
Not gonna hold the National Reentry Network for Returning Citizens.
Peniel Ube, the American Friends Service Committee.
Tori Bateman, American Friends Service Committee.
Shanna O'Toole, Due Process Institute.
Hannah Purcell, Students for Sensible Drug Policy.
Caitlin Schnorr, Heartland Alliance, National Initiatives.
Genevieve Citron, the Justice Programs Office at American University.
Nora Simmons, intern at National Association of Social Workers.
Jamari Hurley, legal intern at the ACLU Washington Legislative Office.
Nia Ibrahim, intern at Vera Institute Justice.
Samira Hafiz, Immigrant Legal Resource Center.
Ed Chuck Sutter from American Progress.
Zoe Turner, intern at the Religious Action Center of Reform Judaism.
Annalise Hafer with CURE.
Logan Schmidt with the Vera Institute of Justice.
Hanian from the Vera Institute.
Emily Stanley, National Center for Lesbian Rights.
Alyssa Whitaker, intern for Drug Policy Alliance.
Good morning. Linda Garcia with the Policing Campaign at the Leadership Conference on Civil and Human Rights.
Marion Humphrey, Campaign for Youth Justice.
Ty Mia, DC's Department of Human Services.
Rashida Ogletree George, the Policing Reform Campaign at the NAACP Legal Defense Fund.
James Stoll, Human Rights for Kids.
Queen Adeswi, Drug Policy Alliance.
Eli Mensing, Urban Institute's Justice Policy Center.
Courtney, Urban Institute Justice Policy Center.
Ashley Salgado, Campaign for Youth Justice.
Francine Kamara, Campaign for Youth Justice.
John Britton, veteran, professor, civil rights lawyer, UDC Law. When Nikichi calls, I come.
Don't we all? Everybody else. Yeah, right.
Chuck Walker, recently retired Commonwealth of Massachusetts attorney, and now I have the pleasure of teaching civil rights and human rights with my mentor, Professor John Britton.
Wow. I'm a novice to Zoom. Are we able to find out who's on the Zoom call as we're finding out who this gentleman is who just walked in?
Kenan Keller, House Judiciary Committee.
Okay, are we able to find out who's on the Zoom? Okay. Okay, let's hear who they are, name and organization. Okay. Are they speaking?
That's how I write. I tend to like throw up on a page and then delete it all. Right?
Okay, I think we're going to pass on that for now, but hopefully folk in Zoom land can hear us, right now. So I'm going to introduce her. Is it working? It looks like it is. And she said it was going to work.
Good morning.
Okay, good morning.
Good morning.
Introduce yourself. Introduce yourself. Call out a name.
Patricia Aller, Justice Strategy. Ken Goldsmith, American Bar Association. Good morning.
Well, that was Catherine with the National Council of Incarcerated and Formerly Incarcerated Women and Girls.
Bruce Nicholson, unaffiliated.
Formerly with the ABA.
Next. Next.
Drew Jacoby, Collier Collective, and Safer Foundation.
Alexandria Wright, American Psychological Association.
Can you just call out the names? Just call out the names you see.
Anthony Underwood.
Cynthia Roseberry. Jasmine Mickens.
Mickens.
LaLauren Booth. I think everyone else named. Okay, great. Welcome, everyone. So, now. Okay, so I'm really pleased to bring on our feature presenter today, someone who's very near and dear to my heart. Someone whose family I've become very, very close to over the past, I'm not quite sure how many years it is now, but for quite a while. Her name is Ebony Underwood. We're talking about someone who is the child of an incarcerated parent. Someone who, in the beginning, didn't know what her voice was, didn't know that there were other people in situations like her. She was an adolescent when her father was incarcerated. And we won't say how old she is now. She's just like still 16 years old now. But she has been fighting. She and her siblings, her brothers and her sisters and her sister and her brothers have been fighting ardently for the release of their father. She's a very accomplished person. She is the founder and president of an organization called We Got Us Now, and she'll talk about that. She serves on the board of directors of the Sentencing Project, and her father was one of those featured in Mark Maurer and Ashley Nellis's new book, The Meaning of Life, which is over there. So I'm going to turn it over to her right now. We had a very, very short video we wanted to share. I'm not quite sure if we're going to share it or not, but I'm going to turn it over. Let's give it up for Ebony Underwood.
I apologize for my lateness. I ate something really bad yesterday, and it did not do well with me, so I apologize for my lateness. So it's not working? No? Fine. All right. All right. It's just a slow connection. Yeah, so I was going to show you all. Oh, wait.
Oh, it's coming up.
No, it is coming up. No, go ahead, do it again. Let's see. I was going to show you all. So I'm a documentary filmmaker, content creator. Prior to advocating for my father's release, I worked in the music and entertainment business, and in an effort to try to bring greater awareness to his, yeah, it's not coming up. In an effort to try to bring greater awareness to his story, back in 2013, 2014, I produced a short documentary called Hope for Father's Day. And I was hoping that we could see it, but I didn't get here early enough for you all to see it. But you can always go to inprison.net and watch it, or you can go to his change.org petition, Free Underwood, and watch his the Hope for Father's Day campaign. Uh-oh. Maybe I'll show you.
No, it's took the plug out.
Other than that,
Go ahead.
Okay.
Keep talking.
Other than that, I'll just talk about like what propelled me to actually speak out. As a daughter of an incarcerated parent for, I guess I should say, as a daughter of an incarcerated parent for a really long time, I never had the courage to share about this story. Number one reason being is because I never knew that anyone else was actually going through this. We are a historically invisible population. Most people that are affected by parental incarceration do not share. And so my father has never stopped being a dad since he's been incarcerated back in 1988. He has always written us letters back then. He emails today. He is consistently, every single year, birthdays, holidays, graduations, just a very consistent and present father. He has always been a very consistent and present father in our lives. And I say that's a testament to my mom, even though she remarried, being able to, understand the significance of us remaining connected to our incarcerated father. All that to say, I still didn't understand why he was incarcerated. I still didn't understand the particulars around it. So I personally, because I've had fear and I did not want anyone else to judge my dad, I personally decided not to speak about it. And so even though he was very consistent, when people would ask, oh, how's your father doing, or where's your father? Oh, he's in whatever state he actually lived in. So he's been in 9 different prisons. So when he was in Indiana, I said, oh, he lives in Indiana now. When he was in Georgia, oh, he's in Georgia now. When he was, he's always traveling, he's a busy guy. I just never shared because of the shame, because of the stigma, because of the lack of understanding. believed that it wasn't in my best interest for me, emotionally, to share. But 2013 came around. My brother Anthony actually really was here in DC attending the Justice Roundtable, and he exclaimed to me that, Ebony, like, it looks like this administration really is going to do some work around bringing your father home. And for me, at that point, it was 25 years. And so we had been emotionally drained because we are very, very much aware of the law. Our father kept us abreast because he never stopped fighting to come home. So when Apprende came out, he was talking about, oh, this may be great. Lack of retroactivity. When Booker came out, oh yeah, this is a big win for us. So we all got excited. Lack of retroactivity. Doesn't apply to him. Another fail. And then, you know, just a continuous cycle of these laws changing, but not affecting his case at all. So it's just like an emotional roller coaster for us. We get excited, and then, okay, no. So even when my brother called me back in 2013 and said, Obama is about to release some people, we were like, I was like, oh, okay, yeah, great. Because at this point, it's like you hear this story all the time, and it's just nothing happens. But I hung up the phone.
Keep going.
But I hung up the phone, and I soon learned that, I'm sorry, I hung up the phone, and I was in my kitchen at the time. And I turned around, and I see my son and my nephew. And in that moment, I realized that they do not know my dad outside of prison walls. And he is an incredible father and could be an incredible grandfather if he had the opportunity. And so that, in that moment, that's what propelled me to say, I gotta say something. I gotta do something. And so, met Nkechi again, because I met her back in 2013, I don't know, I met you like in 2004, around just trying to find, my father
Actually,
always,
it was before that, because I wasn't at Open Society. It was like 2001.
Wow. My father was always on top of the law and was always having one of us, there's four of us, he was always had one of us trying to do some research around how to help him get home. So he found, or heard a conversation with Nkechi on the radio station that he listened to and was like, you need to meet this woman. And so I went, she was in New York one time, he found out she was gonna be in New York. I met her in New York, explained to her our story, and at that point it was really nothing that she could do, because nothing was happening around the law, but we connected and then lost contact. And you know, I have this saying that the universe conspires, because my brother ended up meeting Nkechi again, and he didn't even know that I connected with Nkechi, and he met her, and then another day a friend of ours met Nkechi, and then we reconnected. And in the moment that we reconnected, you know, I told her I want to say something, and she said, wow, I wish you had a letter or something, because I'm going to the White House, and the White House, the Obama White House, has this initiative for children of incarcerated parents. And in that moment, I'm like, what? Children of incarcerated what? She said children of incarcerated parents. I had never heard this term before in my life prior to that. And I'm a pretty informed person. And I'm like, wait, are you serious? So wait, the president knows there's a name for what I've been living, and the president is even like interested in this topic? Oh, this is gonna be great. I gotta say something. Okay, I'm not only gonna write you a letter, but I'm gonna create a documentary short so that we can kind of tell our story, because yeah, in this moment, I need him to see. I need him to see us. I need him to understand that my dad is really an incredible dad. And he is in prison because of drug conspiracy charges. And at that point, he has already served 25 years. So this should be a win. Like, if you have an initiative for us, we're still very much a connected family. So I produced a documentary. We can show it now?
Yes. Just a brief background on your father.
Okay, right. Okay, let me tell you. So prior to my father's arrest, he was in the music industry. He was a manager, a promoter, a publisher. He actually discovered DC's Johnny Gill and put Johnny Gill with New Edition. And wow, yeah, he managed and promoted so many different artists in the music and entertainment business. I'll tell you some of them, from anyone from Ray Charles to Michael Jackson to Kenny Loggins to Earth, Wind and Fire. Just everybody, just like everybody. Yeah, Guy, yeah, Slave. There's so many different artists that he's actually worked with. And he was really at the pinnacle of his career. And 2 years before his arrest, there was an FBI document. There was an FBI investigation done on him. And what was found was nothing. They actually wrote a document saying that there was no activity. And so they closed the case. They closed the case. And then 2 years later, in 1988, he was arrested under drug conspiracy charges, 4 counts, 3 of them 20 years that were concurrent, and non-violent life without parole sentence.
What does drug conspiracy mean?
We're going to hold that. We'll get to it though.
Yeah.
That's
what I used to say. Yeah.
They asked Alice Marie Johnson also. She took some phone messages.
Yeah. So all that to say, yeah, he was a very prominent person in the music industry. And just so you know how prominent he was, on the recent DJ Khaled record that just came out, Nas shouted, "Free Bill Underwood."
Oh, wow.
Yes. So he was a very prominent person, and everybody wants him home. And with that said, I guess we can go into the film Home for Father's Day.
We're going to need your mic.
I mean, from the age of maybe like 14, my dad got locked up, and that absolutely changed my life tremendously. And he's been in for 25 years, and his sentencing was caused by mandatory minimums. Absolutely, he was in there because of these new sentencing guidelines and that new sentencing Reform Act. And it completely changed and took a large chunk of my life away with my dad, me and my siblings. So I'm in the process of as well documenting my story as a child of an incarcerated parent and what my experience has been for the past 25 years.
Hi, my name is Anthony Underwood. I'm on my way to DC. I'm going to OSI, Open Society Institute, to attend a Justice Roundtable. I'm going along with my sister, my 2 nephews, my sister Ebony Underwood. And the reason for my trip today is because my father's currently serving a life with no parole sentence because of mandatory minimums. And even though there are 4 Supreme Court cases that say he should be home by now, they are not retroactive. It's the same thing as telling slaves, we're going to end slavery, but slaves still have to be slaves, but we're going to free your children. So it's that type of situation that we're dealing with.
Mandatory minimum sentences is really a blot in our criminal justice system. There's thousands of people incarcerated under these laws. Many of them are low-level, nonviolent, first-time offenders. There are others who might have been very young when they were sentenced, but they are still tagged with such lengthy sentences, and there's no way to get out from under a mandatory minimum sentence unless you provide what's called substantial assistance to the prosecution. The president is interested in commuting sentences from people who've been serving under this harsh regime of mandatory minimum sentences. Bring us these cases. Let us look at them. It's time that we take a second look at these policies that are causing people to languish in prison. All of these issues are issues that have been litigated in cases, and these cases have been overturned, but they have not been applied to William Underwood, so thus he still languishes in prison, which again is one of the reasons why commutation is a very viable option for him at this time.
I just came from the Justice Roundtable meeting, and I'm feeling really inspired. There were a lot of great organizations there that are in support of sentencing reform as it pertains to mandatory minimums. The big topic today was commutations and clemency. And the only person that can actually make that decision is the president. So hopefully President Barack Obama will be able to make some major changes and help my dad, William Underwood, become one of the faces of commutation and clemency.
So that was the Hope for Father's Day, and unfortunately, that did not happen. That did not happen. So my father was arrested in December 6, 1988, and November 29th, Nkechi gives me a call of 2016 and says that your father was denied. And when I found that out, I just was absolutely devastated, because I was like, there's no way that could have happened. Are you kidding me? We had worked so effortlessly and tirelessly trying to gain awareness and bring awareness to my father and his situation. With that said, in the next year, I decided that I actually found out that this story was not my own. In the years of my advocacy from 2014 into 2016, I had an opportunity to meet with some executives over at Google, and they saw this Hope for Father's Day and were really, really inspired and felt like, you know what, we want to support children of incarcerated parents all around the country. And so we have collectively partnered and spearheaded with them what is now called Google Love Letters. And we are actually working on the third iteration, which will come out next week, of Google Love Letters for Father's Day. Last year we had Taylor Schilling from Orange is the New Black introduce the video, and the year before we had John Legend introduce the video, and this year we'll have a surprise guest introduce the video. All that to say, I realize that this story is greater than my own, and in an effort to support all children who have been impacted by parental incarceration, not just children under the age of 18, because many state organizations support children under the age of 18. But like myself, as an adult, there are many adult children who have been impacted and are suffering silently and are not doomed for incarceration. And because we want to lift up the entire population of children of incarcerated parents, We Got Us Now is an organization that I founded in an effort to raise our voices to ensure that we are in support of one another, in addition to ensuring that our voices are heard through digital narratives, through safe and inclusive spaces, and through advocacy-led campaigns like the Google Love Letters. All that to say, policy for me is a huge, huge issue, and so part of what We Got Us Now does is to create fair sentencing around, of course, mandatory minimums and everything else that will help to keep families connected. So with that being said, I guess we can, I want to add one other thing. I have also been in conversation with Senator Booker. Senator Booker actually had the opportunity to meet with my dad back in 2016, in August of 2016. He's the New Jersey senator, and my father is housed in New Jersey. And after meeting him, I was so grateful that he met him. And after meeting him, I had the opportunity to meet Senator Booker, and he said to me, your father's an incredible dad. I want him to come home. I can't wait to have a vegan dinner with him. and so, you know, true to his word, we have been in conversations around some magical things that may be happening soon around looking at aging incarcerated parents and people that are over 50 that have been incarcerated. So I just want to throw that out there. Thank you.
Let's give it up for Ebony. Thank you so much, Ebony. Ebony talks about children of incarcerated parents and that she is now an adult, but she was a child at one time. And this is just what the nature of these unconscionably lengthy sentences are. They're no longer children. Okay, if someone's been in prison 20, 25, 30 years like her father, okay, the bring up, you know, grown up. So this is just a really major thing. So Ebony, thank you for sharing and thank you for always, you know, coming to DC and helping to spread the information. So now I am just very thrilled that we have a row full of phenomenal folks, staffers from the Hill, who are going to just share just a little bit of a tidbit in terms of what's going on either in their offices or in their committees or anything that they want to share publicly with respect to what's happening in the Senate and in the House. And we'll just follow along from the agenda that you all have. I'll introduce them first, and then I'll just call on each of them pursuant to this. But we have Tona Boyd, who is Chief Counsel with the Office of Senator Cory Booker. We're so glad that you could join us, Tona. We have Keenan Keller, who is the Senior Counsel for the House Judiciary Committee, and we go back a long way, Keenan. So always good to have you. We have Lauren Moore, who is the General Counsel with the Office of Senator Kamala Harris, and I've worked with other people in your office, so I'm really glad to meet you, Lauren. We have our own Rachel Rossi. Welcome to the House. I knew she was in the Senate, and she's counsel now to the House Judiciary Committee. Glad to see you, Rachel. We have Emily Mace, who is legislative counsel with the Office of Representative Bruce Westerman, and I'm so very glad that you could join us and share. We have Patricia Richmond, who's with the Office of Senator Dick Durbin, and always glad to see you. And tell Jay-Z we say hi. So we call him Jay-Z. And Joe Zog. We go that far back. So Patricia, glad to have you. And I think yeah. And so I'm gonna turn the mic over to Tona in about 3 to 5 minutes. Just share whatever tidbits you would like to share with respect to what's happening from your vantage point.
Thank you so much, Nkechi, for having us. So as she said, my name is Tona Boyd. I work for Senator Booker. It's a pleasure to be here. I have met and talked to many of you and working on some of Senator Booker's criminal justice reform efforts. So I'm excited to share a little bit about what we have coming up. So following the First Step Act, Senator Booker really wanted to make sure to continue the momentum in terms of what should come next in terms of criminal justice reform. And so earlier this Congress, he dropped the Next Step Act, which was designed to basically start the conversation about what we should be thinking about next when we think of criminal justice reform. So the Next Step Act is sort of a sweeping omnibus bill that includes measures that are designed to get at sentencing reform, policing reform, prison reform, and re-entry efforts, because it's important that the conversation include all of those aspects of the criminal justice system. So we dropped the omnibus bill earlier this Congress, and we've been since then working on dropping the individual provisions that make up the bill. So in terms of sentencing reform, we're really excited to hopefully this work period in June or maybe in July, drop a bill to eliminate the crack powder disparity in sentencing. So we're really excited about working on that bill. I know Ebony talked about kind of the heartbreak when you have these bills come out and they're not retroactive. So that bill we would obviously have applied both prospectively and retroactively. So that's one that we're excited to work on. Another bill that we've been working on reintroducing is the REDEEM Act. And there are a lot of partners in the room who we've worked closely with to try to reintroduce this bill, which is designed to eliminate some of the barriers that folks face when they come out of prison, to try to get at some of those collateral consequences. So what the REDEEM Act in essence does is creates a sealing and expungement pathway for juvenile offenders, nonviolent juvenile offenders. And then it also creates a sealing pathway for adult nonviolent offenders. And what we've worked to do this Congress is to try to improve the bill. So we've created an automatic sealing provision this time around that will allow adults who have nonviolent convictions to have those automatically sealed after 5 years. If there's no recidivism. So we're excited about that, and we're working hopefully to add some additional improvements to the bill in conjunction with Senator Paul. And then the last thing I want to plug is tomorrow we are hosting a panel discussion on policing reform. So we're hoping to reintroduce some of the bills that were a part of Next Step that deal with policing. But we want to have a broader conversation about what we should be thinking about when we think about policing reform. So we're hosting that in conjunction with the U.S. Commission on Civil Rights and the Leadership Conference on Civil and Human Rights. So a shout out to Linda Garcia, who's here. She will be one of our panelists, and it'd be great if you all could join. It's going to be tomorrow in the Dirksen Senate building at 1 p.m., and it's going to be in room G11. And I'm happy to send the flyer to Mikichi to circulate to the roundtable. And thank you.
Thank you so very much. Thank you. Great information. We're going to turn now to Keenan Keller, Senior Counsel with the House Judiciary Committee.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
It's good to be here, and I'm looking around the room and I'm seeing lots of familiar faces of people and organizations I've worked with over the years. Hi, Mark. I haven't seen you for a while. I want to thank all of you for the work that you've done, for the dedication of your organizations, and for the work that you will be assisting us in doing. On the House Judiciary Committee side, we're going to bifurcate this. We've got Rachel down on the other end of the table, and she'll talk to you about things like bail reform, Next Step, juvenile justice, marijuana, things like that. I want to talk to you about another sort of tranche of issues that we're working on that are more on the civil justice side. I know that all of you are watching with bated breath because on the 25th we have the anniversary of the Shelby County v. Holder case, which has actually impacted us in so many different ways. We are doing a robust run into voting rights this session, and I think we've already had 3 hearings thus far, and we're trying to tee up reauthorization legislation so that we can actually get Section 5 of the Voting Rights Act back. We'll have a hearing on the 25th on the anniversary of Shelby County. On the democracy restoration side of things, all of you are probably familiar with what we've done with H.R. 1. The Democracy Restoration Act was a key provision of H.R. 1, and it was passed and debated to a degree. We're going to go back, though, and do a run on all of the bills that were part of H.R. 1, and we're going to dig specifically into what's been going on around the Democracy Restoration Act and democracy restoration provisions across the country. I saw an interesting article a day or two ago talking about the fact that notwithstanding the great victory that we had in the referendum in Florida, that individuals in the other party are trying to sort of retrench on that, and something like $1 billion of fines needed to be paid for people to actually get their voting rights back, and that looked a lot like a poll tax. The next thing I want to talk about is policing. Next week, we will reintroduce the End Racial Profiling Act. Representative Jackson Lee and Chairman Nadler will drop that. And in July, we're planning to have an oversight hearing on policing. We will hopefully have participation by the Civil Rights Division and DOJ, but we will also have advocates and experts to talk about policing and policing reform. After the End Racial Profiling Act, we are going to look at the long list of bills that have been introduced and referred to the committee, and we're going to try to move back towards substantive legislation beyond the End Racial Profiling Act, which those of you who have been around for a while know was negotiated with the Ashcroft DOJ at the request of President Bush, who in his first State of the Union address said that he wanted a bill on his desk that fall. 9/11 intervened, and so we've never actually had that legislation passed and made into law, and we've actually even suffered through racial profiling guidances that have been highly problematical. On the second chance side of things, we want to go back and again have more substantive reauthorization hearings to actually dig into programs so that we can continue to support reentry in that aspect of criminal justice reform. And finally, on the issue of restorative justice. Those of you who have been around for a while know that back in 1989, Representative Conyers first introduced H.R. 40 to study the issue of reparations. With the retirement of Representative Conyers, Representative Jackson Lee has picked up that mantle. Adding its voice to the discussion of H.R. 40 and reparations in a big way this year is the ACLU. And we are planning on having a hearing on H.R. 40 coming up soon on an auspicious day. I won't say any more than that.
Oh, we need to know about that.
But think about auspicious days coming up. And we will have an interesting, important group of witnesses when we have this hearing on this auspicious day. And because, again, given where we are in this legislative cycle and what's been going on in the nation since the election of the president, we really need to go back and dig into these issues and talk about restorative justice. And we have presidential candidates like Senator Booker, who has endorsed reparations, and Senator Harris, who has endorsed reparations in H.R. 40 also, along with another growing list of candidates who are not necessarily represented in this room. And the senators have also introduced a companion bill to H.R. 40 in the Senate. So I think that we've actually captured so much more speed now in the last year and a half, with good reason, after things like Charlottesville, that we need to dig into these issues to really understand better what's going on in our country. That was a lot to say, but there's a lot going on, and that's only half. You haven't even heard from Rachel yet. So I'm going to pass back the mic.
Okay, great. Thank you so very much, Keenan. I know I personally celebrate a holiday that's called Juneteenth or June 19th. I'm sure that has nothing to do with that auspicious date that you're talking about, but I just want to acknowledge it's a holiday that I do celebrate with formerly enslaved persons found out late that emancipation had come. So thank you for sharing that. So now we're going to go to Lauren Moore, who is General Counsel for the Office of Senator Kamala Harris. Share with us, Lauren.
Thank you, Nkechi, for having me today. And hi, everyone. So one of the big legislative proposals that Senator Harris has put forward recently in May was relating to public defense reform. As a lot of the people in this room know, public defenders are notoriously overworked, underpaid, and left to manage daunting caseloads. In some places, public defenders are carrying 5 times the number of recommended cases, and they're rarely paid on par with their counterparts in the prosecutor's office. So, are we live? Okay. So the resulting resource disparity means that the scales are far too often tipped in favor of the prosecution. My boss introduced the Equal Defense Act in May to help remedy that problem, and increase pay and boost resources for public defenders to make sure that they're able to deliver on our constitutional guarantees. We're really excited about the bill. It's gotten really great coverage and has helped to provide a spotlight on access to counsel issues, which very often have taken a back seat in our conversations about criminal justice reform. But we think it's super important to acknowledge the ways in which our system has undervalued public defenders and by extension undervalued the people that they represent. So that's a proposal that's, that was introduced in May and that we're very excited about and wanted to share with you today. The other thing that my boss is working on is reintroduction of bail reform, which encourages states to eliminate the practice of conditioning someone's release pre-trial on ability to pay a fee. We're working very closely with Senator Paul on that, and we're hoping to have it drop sometime in the next month.
Fabulous. Thank you so very much, Lauren, Officer Kamala Harris. We're going to turn now to Rachel Rossi, who is counsel now with the House Judiciary Committee.
Hi everyone, thanks for having me here. So I work on the crime subcommittee for the House Judiciary Committee, and there are a number of legislative priorities that the subcommittee is looking at right now, as Keenan mentioned, including bail, conspiracy reform, marijuana, crimes, women in the criminal justice system, and learning from the state's reforms across the country in informing further reforms at the federal level. But what I want to focus on more specifically today, because a lot of those legislative efforts are still kind of underway and being developed, and can't talk in too much detail about them. I want to talk about our efforts to kind of oversee implementation of the First Step Act, which passed last year. So some of you know the First Step Act passed in December of last year, and it was definitely just a first step. It was modest reforms to both sentencing and prison sides of the criminal justice system. And you know, in our view, if this reform isn't successful, there won't be appetite for more reform. And so we want to ensure that we are closely watching the Department of Justice as they are implementing these reforms and ensure that there are no efforts to scale back or to minimize in the areas where the bill left a lot of discretion. So specifically, there was one provision in the First Step Act that required an independent review committee to kind of oversee what was going on. And by its nature, that independent review committee was supposed to be independent and an expert in criminal justice reform and in risk assessments and in essentially ensuring there are no racial disparities. We were concerned to see that the Department of Justice announced the selection of the Hudson Institute in April of this year to house the independent review committee. And our concerns are, at a basic level, it appears that the Hudson Institute has very little experience in this area, if any experience at all. And on top of that, we've seen that the Hudson Institute has actively opposed criminal justice reform in the past. So Chairman Nadler and Chair of the Crime Subcommittee, Ms. Bass, sent a press release asking the Department of Justice to immediately rescind this selection. We've asked for numerous briefings from the Department of Justice to ask further detailed questions about why and how this institute was selected. We think that although these issues are not as sexy, I guess, as, you know, large-scale criminal justice reform, it's very important that we get this right. It's very important that the independent body that is overseeing these reforms is actually independent and is doing it correctly. So we're very, very focused on that. Also, there was a provision in the First Step Act for good time conduct that would essentially, if you're not familiar with the issue, the law says that for every year of time that you spend in prison, you get 54 days off. The Bureau of Prisons has, for years, since the 80s, has viewed that as, through their own calculation, as 47 days. One of the provisions in the First Step Act made that change so that it is now clear in the law that it has to be 54 days. This change, it sounds small, but it would affect everyone, almost everyone in prison. It would be a large-scale effect on a lot of people. It's something that advocates in this room have been fighting for decades. And we've been pushing BOP to implement it immediately. We've been told that BOP is going to start recalculating in July of this year, and so we are hopeful to see that that happens. We're also told that this may result in the release of 2,000 to 3,000 people in July of this year. And so we are hopeful and we are staying vigilant on that. And if it doesn't happen in July, we may have to take further action. And then the final thing is the budget, which is more the Appropriations Committee task, but we are working with the Appropriations Committee and the report for the bill, for the appropriations bill that specifically deals with the Bureau of Prisons came out this week, and despite the president's budget request that actually requested a cut in funding to the Bureau of Prisons and did not request sufficient funding for the First Step Act, our Appropriations Committee has requested far above the requested amount by the president's budget. So these are some of the small things that we are focused on in oversight because these small things will matter if it sabotages the results of this legislation and makes people who are opposed to criminal justice reform, gives them an argument that it doesn't work. And so that's kind of one of our main focuses. But stay tuned for all the legislative efforts that will be coming soon. Thank you.
Thank you so very much, Rachel. We have a lot to look forward to. I would like to give the mic now to Emily Mace, who's with the Office of Representative Bruce Westerman. And go ahead, share.
Yeah, so our office is relatively new to this space. In 2017, I'll just share briefly the background of how we got involved. In 2017, the state of Arkansas passed a law, Act 539, that said juvenile offenders who have been sentenced to life without parole cannot go more than a certain number of years without having a parole hearing. So it essentially eliminated that sentence. And when we learned about this, my boss said, is that something that's at the federal level as well? And we were shocked to learn that despite Supreme Court dicta that said juveniles should be treated differently and should not have life without parole sentences, that was still a part of federal law. So we introduced HR 6011 in last Congress, and that bill attempted to eliminate the sentence of juvenile life without parole in the federal system. Unfortunately, it did not pass, and so this past January we were looking at reintroducing and getting that effort off the ground. Around the same time, the governor of Tennessee commuted Centoya Brown's sentence, and my boss said, you know, what else can we do? He continued to be surprised by some of the stories that we were hearing coming out of the justice system. And so we got in touch with some of our colleagues and ended up introducing a package of 3 bills in March. One with the language from our juvenile life without parole bill from last Congress, and that is now HR 1951. And then we introduced 2 others, one that allows judges in the federal system to depart from mandatory minimums when they are sentencing juveniles in the justice system. And then another one, which is called Sarah's Law, which allows judges to completely depart from sentencing individuals who are found to have committed a crime against a sexual abuser if they are a juvenile and it's determined that the individual who was the victim of a crime had been sexually trafficking, raping, abusing this child. And that is named after an individual named Sarah Curzan. Maybe you guys have heard her story. She is from California. She had been trafficked for 6 years, eventually was able to get out of that situation only by killing her abuser, her pimp, and then she went to prison. The judge was not allowed to consider her story when he was sentencing her. He was only allowed to consider the fact that she had killed an individual, and so she got a life sentence. And it's just unbelievable. Eventually, she was fortunately commuted. Her sentence was commuted by the governor of California, and so she now is an advocate for passing laws similar to our Sarah's Law all across the country. There are several states that have introduced similar laws, and we're really excited to be a part of that effort. I'll just mention briefly, we are seeking co-sponsors. We're open to Senate partners, and if there are organizations that wish to voice their support for one or two or three of these bills, James Dold, he's here with the Human Rights for Kids organization, and also Rachel is here with Campaign for Youth Justice. Both of their organizations are leading letters that several dozen organizations now have committed to signing, and we're just trying to get the public more aware of these bills and those on the Judiciary Committee who have the ability to move them forward. So, thanks.
Thank you so very much. And last but definitely not least, we have Patricia Richmond, who is detailing counsel for Senator Dick Durbin and the Senate Judiciary Committee. Always glad to have folk from the federal defenders, you know, in the House. So, Patricia, bring it home.
No pressure. Thanks so much for having me today. It's been great to see many of you who have had the chance to meet so far, and also to put some faces with names that I've gotten a chance to correspond with. And it's just great to be in this room, to feel the energy, to know that we're in such a special and powerful moment in criminal justice reform. The consensus is really starting to turn the other way. It's becoming accepted and the norm to be advocating for less sentences, for less people in jail, and it's great to have this room to ride that energy as far as we can take it. Senator Durbin's office, we, like the House Judiciary Committee, are hyper-focused on the implementation of the First Step Act. We are very mindful of the fact that we need to get it right as much as we can, and that we need to vigorously oversee the Department of Justice and Bureau of Prisons implementation of the Act. And there have been challenges, as Rachel discussed. We were dismayed to see the selection of the Hudson Institute as the IRC. We've been upset that the Bureau of Prisons and the Department of Justice has chosen to interpret the statutory language around good time credit in the manner they have. And frankly, we have encountered resistance by the DOJ and the BOP to being accountable and transparent with us. But there's good news. I understand by the most recent set of numbers that 1,184 people have had their sentences reduced as a result of the First Step Act. And we've got 891 people who have come home so far. And one thing that's been nice to see is judges seize upon the First Step Act, reject incorrect arguments about what that law means that are being put forth by the Department of Justice, and use the First Step Act as an opportunity to undo unfair and unjust sentences. We've seen the compassionate release program expand. I understand that there have been around 28 compassionate releases, and we understand that the elderly pilot program is being expanded as well. We're glad to hear that dates are being recalculated for good time credit. We understand that Bureau of Prisons is beginning to upstream people who are going to be eligible for release to halfway houses. It took too long. We're glad it's happening, and we will join with the House if it does not happen on July 19th in voicing our displeasure at that and taking necessary actions where we can. Senator Durbin is very committed to bipartisan measures to advance criminal justice. It's the political reality that we're in the Senate. And we think that there are wonderful opportunities to reach out to our colleagues across the aisle and build bipartisan coalitions where we can, with an eye towards expanding those later. Senator Durbin was pleased to introduce with Senator Sullivan from Alaska the Due Process Protection Act. And that is a bill that reaffirms prosecutors' obligations to adhere to their evidentiary disclosure rules in every single criminal proceeding. We also, with our colleague Senators Booker, Senator Grassley, Senator Whitehouse, and Senator Lee, led a letter after hearing that the OPM was going to start having federal contractors and potential federal contractor employees and potential employees report participation in diversion programs as part of the employment screening process. As a result of that letter and the other energy around that, we were very pleased to hear that they have quietly pulled back that proposal. We are talking now about bigger scale proposals that we can set forth with our bipartisan colleagues. We're still in preliminary discussions about those. There will be more to come. So we're looking forward, and we're also looking at what's happening now. Thanks so much.
Just to say, Ken Goldsmith sent to you good news. He sent a text saying, good news.
We are going to open up for Q&A in just a second. We have a few minutes for that. I just want to say I'm just very inspired by everything I hear. I mean, I'm telling you, there was a time, okay, I know exactly when it was, because I was pregnant with my daughter at the time, 25 years ago, okay, where we were fighting against measures, fighting against omnibus crime bills, crime bill after crime bill, which culminated in what I call the granddaddy of all the crime bills, the crime bill of 1994. And, you know, yes, we still are, absolutely. Now we're trying to undo all of those excesses, you know, the death penalties and the evisceration of the exclusionary rule and 3 strikes and the trying 13-year-olds as adults and more money to states to build more and more prisons and failure to fix the crack powder disparity. All of those were issues that were going on then in the early 90s. So it really does warm my heart to see that we're dealing with progressive measures now, measures that can really help to transform the system. So we're going to just take a few minutes, if that's okay, to see if there are any questions that I guess can respond to. Zakia, and introduce yourself and your organization.
Zakia Sankar Jabbar, co-founder of Racial Justice Now. We have a D&D chapter now. The organization was co-founded in Dayton, Ohio. I'm also the national field director with the Dignity in Schools campaign. So my first question was, what is drug conspiracy? But then I also heard about these different hearings that are coming up, particularly on police reform. And I'm wondering, because I know for Dignity in Schools, we have a campaign to end the regular presence of law enforcement in schools. And do you have any representation of organizations who are organizing parents and youth to push back on police presence in schools and their arrests of our young people in our schools?
So let me just say, we're going to have our working group reports after that, and one of our working groups is Drug Policy Working Group. So can I save the drug conspiracy question there? Is that okay, Michael and company? And let's go to the other question right now. Ashley, go on.
Can we ask Rachel to just give a brief summary of what drug conspiracy is?
Okay.
I mean, just I mean, you have an expert here. You have a federal defender here.
So to your question, what is drug conspiracy? Exactly. That's part of the problem with drug conspiracy.
Yeah, right. It's a question we're on.
So drug conspiracy, essentially, there are very archaic mandatory minimums in the drug laws. What drug conspiracy does is it says that if you act with someone else, or if another person, if you enter into an agreement with someone, and then that person does other acts that you may not know about, but you should know, or you should reasonably anticipate that they might do these other acts, you can get caught up for what they did. Wow. So one of the problems with drug conspiracy is that it's super broad, and that if oftentimes it can capture very low-level people who don't even know what's going on in this massive drug ring, and it could really be the kingpin or someone who's much more higher up who is aware of everything that's going on, but because of the drug conspiracy laws, you can get caught up for what everyone else is doing. And that can include drugs, that can include firearms, and that can enhance your mandatory minimum significantly. And so a lot of groups in the past have been looking at how can we narrow this, how can we make it more narrow, and that's one of the things that we're hopeful to look at.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rachel. And since I mentioned her before, I went on and picked out her book, Alice Marie Johnson, her new book called Afterlife, My Journey from Incarceration to Freedom. Just an excellent, poignant, real-life example of drug conspiracy, okay? She basically was taking messages over the phone and referring those messages to other people. She never used or handled any drugs. The same is the case with Kimber Smith, if you remember that case from back in the day. But because of the drug conspiracy laws, everything is taken into, everybody is under the same broad net, I guess you could say, and getting the same sentence. Again, as I said, unless you have valuable information to share with the prosecutor. And oftentimes, folks on the lowest level of the law don't have that information. Serving life without parole, sentences. Kimber Smith, a 24-and-a-half-year sentence. William Underwood, life without parole. And that's not to say that people were 100% innocent and never had anything to do with selling drugs or having anything to do drugs. But to treat everyone the same, no matter what level that you're at, no matter what your involvement is, whether you had stopped and left and doing other things in your life, something just is not right about that. So, excellent question. And you had another question.
Police and schools.
Police and schools. Is there anyone here?
Around police reform.
So, working with Representative Scott, we had and have an outstanding GAO engagement to study school resource officers.
Okay.
This is one of the things that's being looked at in both judiciary and the Committee on Education and the Workforce. One of the things that we are doing in our overall sweep legislatively around policing reform is to actually look at school resource officers in terms of these categories. So we're trying to sort of sweep all of this in because we realize that depending upon what jurisdiction you're in, SROs sometimes are essentially off-duty police or deputized, and any referral to an SRO actually brings a child into the criminal justice system rather than having it as a school disciplinary issue. Right. And that's what we're actually looking at the GAO study level. So this is a work in progress, and there's more that will come out of this. I wanted to tag one thing on to what Rachel was saying. For those of you who were around for the implementation of the sentencing guidelines, you have to remember that this whole issue of how drug conspiracy charges actually worked under a guideline system rather than a mandatory minimum sentence, mandatory minimum based system would actually allow judges more discretion to actually evaluate the actual participation of an individual within a, quote, drug conspiracy, because a drug conspiracy is the entire operation of the sale of controlled substances under Title 18. So if you're taking phones, if you're standing on a street corner, essentially what the conspiracy charge does is allows the prosecution to actually put more leverage on individuals to get testimony and to force cooperation. And the flip side of what Nkechi was talking about is that people at a low level don't necessarily know anything. I've actually defended individuals in that specific case, but that was when I was doing this was actually under a guideline system, under a mandatory minimum system. It's very different. They're going to sweep everybody in, and then they're going to charge everybody up, and then that's why you get these long sentences that we have right now.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, Keenan. Do we have time for one or two? I'm going to give the mic to Angela, and if you can take it around. No, yeah.
Suzanne Bergeron, National Urban League. I wanted to get, while we have both sides of the aisle here, a sense of when you talk about bipartisanship, to what extent, dealing with the politics we're dealing with right now, when you get bumping up against McConnell in the Senate, is there a sense that something could still move, or are we still dealing with, a ceiling that he's not going to move anything? I mean, to what extent is the bipartisanship bubbling up, so to speak?
Who's answering?
It's difficult, right, to say that we're actually going to be able to get things to move, but the things that will move will be bipartisan, and that's why my boss is trying to find partners on the Judiciary Committee in particular to build the kind of coalitions that we would need to see that. This is the same Congress that passed the First Step Act, so it's not impossible, but it is a challenge. And we're approaching it in both big ways and small ways. I don't know if you have further comment.
No, I think that's absolutely right. I think, looking more granular at committee activity, that's another area where there are good prospects for bipartisanship depending on the issue. I know that historically on the matter of indigent defense, Senator Grassley has done a lot of work and has been quite committed to it. So there is room for optimism, and committees provide a good forum to maybe have a hearing, further shine a spotlight on certain issues. So there are things short of kind of getting to a vote on the floor that are worth our time and attention and are part of the kind of draw to bipartisanship.
That being said, we're in rough water at this point. In terms of bipartisanship, this is the most difficult Congress I've ever seen in my career on the Hill, period.
Wow. Wow. And how long have you been on the Hill?
And I've been on the Hill for 18 years.
Oh,
okay.
God.
So this is actually a very, very difficult period. The Senate, the Democrats are in the minority, and the Senate has a different set of rules for operation than the House. In the House, I think the issue for us is making sure that there are some other issues that are occupying the time of the Judiciary Committee. I don't know if you're familiar with them at all. But for us, it's making sure that we are elevating issues outside the investigation of the President. And making sure that we're actually organizing within our majority in our chamber. And so that's one of the reasons why you want to keep interfacing with our staff to make sure that your priorities are known and understood. I mean, call us up, send us emails. We're very accessible, as all of you know. But it's the issue of actually focusing that effort and then finding opportunities for bipartisanship to actually get above the noise level that we're actually coping with through the news cycles, and then working with our colleagues over in the Senate to actually find out if we then are able to develop the appropriate mix. I think if anything is going to happen, you will know, if anything significant is going to happen, you will know past the first of the year. I think it's going to be really rough water for the rest of this calendar year.
So I think that's it for the questions. Okay, Carol, you're going to be the last.
I just had a really quick question.
Okay.
Which was, you want me to switch to somewhere?
So the Justice Roundtable has a long history on crack disparity and elimination. I'm just curious, I think in the past Senator Rand Paul supported the ending the crack disparity. Is he going to support it again in this Congress, the bill that you all are thinking of dropping?
Unclear.
I'm just because there's been a lot of, I've been in a lot of conversations in recent years, even with Republican offices who expressed interest in that issue. So it seems that's an opportunity for bipartisanship.
We hope so.
Oh, I'm giving it to Kira. Are you doing it?
Oh, almost. No, almost. Good morning.
Good morning.
We are going to There's still more. Okay. Oh, okay. So first of all, I want to thank the panel for please give them a
of those days, hard to get off the hill, and especially in the morning, so we really, really appreciate so many of you showing up, and your updates were very helpful. Actually, we'll probably fly through our own updates, because a lot of our updates were a part of what you conveyed to us this morning, so thank you very much. And please always think of the Justice Roundtable as a resource for any of your work that you're doing on the Hill, particularly related to criminal justice reform.
Let's just pause for a moment in case they want to leave. They can
Okay.
stay here.
All right. So we're just going to pause for a moment because Nikichi is going to, and this is always dangerous, Nikichi is going to try to pull up a video.
It's only a couple of minutes. Oh, this is that you all are transitioning.
And we're going to see
And if
how
anybody
that
wants to
works.
come up to the table, please do. So I'm going to see if this video was done by my former intern, Eve. Raise your hand. This was last year, I think it was, right? So let's just see if it works. How do you make it big? How you do it?
Brought together, we got the call for the Justice Roundtable, we had responded, and it couldn't be more critical. No. So, well, our current reminded that we are all in the same
All right, that was just a little big net. I know the sound wasn't very good, but thank you, Eve, for going and producing that. So we want to come on and grab another coffee or whatever. We're going to speed through our working group updates, and we have space around the table, particularly if you are one who makes a report and you're not already around the table, come on up to the table. We have space right here. Okay, Jesslyn, okay, everyone's getting there. Is there another question right now that I might be able to answer? Anybody has any question about the history of the Roundtable or anything along those lines before we go on and go into our working group reports? The working groups are the lifeblood of the Justice Roundtable. It's where you can be engaged in information with respect to sentencing reform or reentry or law enforcement or drug policy or various state issues or criminalization or commutations and pardons, racial justice, human rights, juvenile justice, reentry. And yes, I'm going to go in and turn it over to Jesslyn right now. If there's anybody else who wants to come up to the table, you're certainly and totally welcome to. Come on, Anthony. Come on. Malcolm, come on up. Zakia. Okay, here we are. Back now.
Okay, thank you. Thanks again for hanging in there. We're almost to the end, and Nikichi always likes to say we're going to end on time. So So we are probably gonna do a speed round of updates. I don't have much to say for the sentencing reform, except I do want to mention that some of us may have gotten an email from the Hudson Institute yesterday, probably based on those who went to the listening session. So let me back up for a minute. On April 3rd and 5th, there was a listening session with NIJ, and the purpose of the listening session was to get input from stakeholders. I'm not sure they call them stakeholders, but stakeholders about the process of developing these risk and needs assessment tools that's going to be used to determine whether people are released to halfway houses early under First Step Act. So that was April 3rd and 5th. Many of us went and participated in the listening session. April 5th was a Friday. By Monday morning, they had already announced the appointment of the Hudson Institute as the host of the Independent Review Committee, because a lot of us talked about how the need to get the Independent Review Committee was important. But by Monday, they had already announced Hudson Institute. They had already announced the members of the Independent Review Committee. And now what I can tell from this email is that the Independent Review Committee is now asking for any additional information that we want to submit to them about the risk and needs assessment.